Hello, friends. You're back with the new Generation Airships project. Today we have an unusual guest. Our guest today is Vyacheslav Ivanov. He's an aspiring writer who came to us from St. Petersburg, and today we will be talking with him about his brand new book, which he has just very recently finished writing. It is currently in the process of being produced and published. And
At the printing house.
at the printing house. And, strangely enough, or maybe not so surprisingly, his book is about travel, about the adventures of a young guy, and the most interesting thing is that he overcomes all these adventures aboard a dirigible. So that's actually why we're here today, to meet Vyacheslav, find out how the idea for this book came about, what inspired him, and, in general, to talk about dirigibles. Yes. Hello, Vyacheslav. Hello. I'm very glad that we're having this conversation today. It promises to be quite fascinating because, as I understand, the book is about adventures. And so, tell us, in general, how did you come up with the idea to write this book? What inspired you, and how long ago did you start writing it?
Well, I actually started writing it a long time ago. The idea came to me quite a while back. I had never written a book before.
Is this your first book?
Yes, it's my first book. And, like any child, I read books in school. And then I kept reading books all my life. Since childhood, I loved Soviet science fiction. Not Soviet. Jules Verne, Alexander Romanovich Belyaev, Kazantsev, and many other authors. I didn't read those books. I also loved telling my classmates what I read. We had sessions where teacher would say, "Share with the class." An open mic. If you want, please tell us what you've read. Share it. And I remember it yesterday. I talked about a book by Alexander Romanovich Belyaev. It was the last book he published, Ariel. And somehow, it stuck with me. I must have been about 12 or 13 years old. I can't remember now. It left a mark on memory, touched soul. It's a book about adventures of a flying boy. The book was written at the end of the 1930s, published in Leningrad in May 1941, and then the war began. But then, I don't even know. I don't know what got into me, what pushed me. This was about 7 years ago, maybe 6. Read it again. Because in recent years, I've also become interested in the issue, the question of levitation, aeronautics.
I feel drawn to the sky too.
Yeah. Aeronautics, levitation. Electromagnetic levitation, sure, but really everything related to the physics of the process. I wonder, maybe some writers have clues about it. Writers didn't write for no reason. Take Jules Verne, for example. Did he really invent what he described, or did he design what was to come?
And he wrapped it all up as science fiction.
Yeah, as science fiction stories and novels, we've all read them. In Search of the Castaways, The Mysterious Island, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and so on. Many captains and engineers grew up reading those books, inspired by them. Of course, they saw that it wasn't just a technical device, but actual transportation, any kind, including airships. It's just a means of transportation. It's for people who can cover and discover new spaces, to open up the world for themselves, to be free, and to travel to places where, really, with other types of transport, if we're talking about airships, it's impossible to reach. But, well, in the end, I reread that book again.
Ariel. By the way, let me interrupt for a second. I looked into the plot a bit and noticed that the main character, Artem, also read that book.
He did, yes. The book actually starts with a teenager finishing reading Ariel, closing the book, and tomorrow is an important day for him. 14-year-old from St. Petersburg, 2035, on a trip with his grandfather. We've transitioned. The beginning of the book, he sets off on a journey. And when I reread Ariel, I realized I hadn't noticed it. But now, when? In maturity, with gray hair already, yes, and when many decades have passed, even after I read this book, almost 50 years have gone by since I first read it, I realized the book was unfinished. I lacked the urge as a child. Other distractions.
That's it, all done.
Yeah, and I went off to play soccer, to play hockey if it was summer. Basically, I had other things to do. But now, and there is
A clear.
a clear setup for a sequel, and then when I found out that he died literally in the winter of 42, and not even his grave is known where he is. He had been bedridden since childhood, but he too was drawn to the sky. He saw at one of the shows how a gymnast performed an acrobatic stunt from a hot air balloon. Yes, she jumped out of the basket and her parachute opened. Everyone was amazed. How is that possible? How is that possible? And this boy, who was 9 years old, he decided to try jumping. With an umbrella, with a bedsheet, he got seriously injured. But maybe that was his fate, because he wrote a huge number of books, and Ariel was his last book, and truly, this longing for the sky, the urge to fly, to be free.
It never left him.
Yeah, it never left him, that's true. This urge to fly, we all have it. But we probably think, what kind of flying? There's the flight of thought, consciousness, joy, imagination, and actual flight. The first time I flew on a hang glider, no, that's not right. It was a paraglider. It was an incredible feeling. It's not quite free flight, but still, it's a state that's pretty close. It's like suddenly the ground drops away beneath you. Just a moment ago you were running, and then you're flying, maybe 5 or 6 years back. That's probably how it happened. I just remembered and pieced the timeline together. Exactly. So, naturally, after reading about it, I went and looked up his biography in even more detail. When you're a teenager, you don't really care much about biographies. We weren't writing essays or scientific papers back then. But then, I found out he was born on March 4th, and my birthday is also March 4th.
And our first stage of New Generation Airships was on March 4th, too.
So, I thought, wow, how is that possible? What a coincidence. Then there were many coincidences while I was writing the book. Sometimes I wondered, when I started writing, the best way is to write it yourself.
So you were looking for ways to somehow continue this book.
Yes, I was thinking about what would have happened next if Belyaev had survived and hadn't died during the blockade, or rather, he was in Pushkin, that was under the Germans. His entire archive was taken away by the Gestapo, so this man had a lot of very secret knowledge, because if you really look at his novels, like Professor Dowell's Head, then we have, oh Lord, our Ichthyander, what's his name?
I can't help you there.
You know the famous movie Ichthyander, the novel about the amphibian man. It's called Amphibian Man. He had many other novels. He wrote on various topics, very advanced from a physics standpoint. So, this was the 1930s, when new technologies, which we now consider old, actually still haven't reached their full potential even today. But that's how it was. In short, I decided I needed to come up with a plot, and I did. I came up with the storyline, Transitions. This is the first book.
How long ago did you start writing?
Well, it's been a few years. I don't know. maybe 3 years ago. But, you know, a book isn't just, let's say, a series of events and drama. Why do you write a book?
There's some kind of goal behind it.
Yeah. But why? I thought, but at least there's this principle. If you want to achieve something greater, start doing what you've never done before. That's the only way we develop. Even if you think it's not your thing. Because for various reasons, especially in our teenage years, and then as young adults, we don't really choose our own future or path. It's influenced by our external circumstances, our parents, our teachers, our classmates. Hey, let's go to college together.
Let's check out this new club.
Yeah.
Let's meet someone new.
It's kind of obvious, but that's exactly how it is. And a person seemed to be moving toward their goal, even though, at that age, 14, 15, 16, not everyone is even aware of what their goals are.
I don't even think those thoughts are there yet.
So, they just live their lives, right? Enjoying life. Of course, only a very few people truly know where they're going and precisely why they're going there. But in the end, to put it quite simply, I started writing. And in August of last year, I didn't have an ending. How to finish it? I was thinking, well, you know. So, like any writer, I ran into a crisis. I took the beginning from the ending of Belyaev's novel. So, when he finished, I decided to continue from there. I myself turned to him many times. A prayer in terms of asking for permission to continue, to experiment. And in the end, August of last year, the online conference Aeronova.
That was the very first conference.
I was online and someone. That was a little miracle too, because at that moment my internet wasn't working and YouTube wasn't working for me at all. I didn't even have time to set up a VPN or anything. And for some reason, at that moment, it just started working.
And you went on YouTube and watched the conference.
I watched the conference. Such inspiration, the ending. Yes, the airship, that will be the ending. It's flying, and all adventures are connected to the airship. Especially since it was 1935, airships were in full swing when the events of that book took place. The Hindenburg hadn't burned in New York yet, and there were still a lot of airships, not only in Germany but in other countries too. And in the Soviet Union, they were actively developing them as well. That's why I thought, well, let me just. And in the end, and then, when, before, well, let's put it this way, publishing. I thought, okay, I need to write some kind of foreword for the book. Well, like how the times are connected and so on. And I thought it would be good to make a contemporary character, but not from today, because airships are still kind of exotic in our country, but from the very near future. So, the year 35, and I imagined that a boy sets off on a journey with his grandfather, his own grandfather, on a journey across our country, aboard the beautiful airship Aurora. Yeah. Well, coming from our city, what other name could there be? Only Aurora, and in the end, the foreword was supposed to be very short. But from the foreword, a book was born, because the first book that was being written, it still needs to be revised, considering that another book moved ahead of it.
Is that really how it happened?
Yes. And now the book is written, illustrated, with 300 illustrations.
Congratulations on that, of course. It was a long journey.
And naturally, when I decided to start with the foreword, I needed an assistant. And at that moment, I was on a business trip, not for Aeronova, but for my own entrepreneurial project. I was in Belyaev, And there is the Ivalginsky Datsan, where the incorruptible, inexhaustible body of Lama Itigilov is kept. According to legend, before he went on his spiritual ascension, which Buddhists call samadhi, he spoke about it as well. The Beryats tell stories about this.
Did you go there specifically to see that?
No, it was a business trip. But how could I not visit such a miracle when it's so close? The Beryats told me all the legends connected to this man, how he was unearthed.
Briefly, yes. Can you tell us about this person?
In 1927, he gathered his disciples, lamas, at the Ivalginsky Datsan and said, "I am leaving to meet the spiritual, or Mai. They have their understanding. I will enter samadhi, you bury me in a box, and in 75 years, dig me up."
So, they buried him right in the ground, for 75 years, in a wooden box.
In a wooden box. They even covered him with salt.
And he,
And when they invited him to the forensic medical courts, because, well, this was an exhumation.
What year did they end up digging him up?
They dug him up in 2002. But forensic experts ran away because they couldn't confirm his death. The body was warm. No signs of decay. After 75 years? After 75 years, yes. And today, he is still in that monastery at the Ivalginsky Datsan. Buddhists from all over the world come to see him. He is in the lotus position. He doesn't say anything, remains silent. Yes, that's the body. I went there and listened to them talk about how he could fly before he was in this state, and how he would travel over the lakes of Belyaev in the 1920s during the revolution and all that.
Naturally, you got interested.
I got interested, and I thought, well, Lama, help me keep writing the book with you.
So you were there, being at.
Yes. I mentally reached out to him, said, I need an assistant. Because the idea had become so grand, I needed someone, a co-author. I found a co-author. Or rather, he found me. I'd reached out, and days later, someone who knew me from a different topic introduced himself. We started talking, and he accepted the book idea I shared. With my co-author, we have a pseudonym, Ivan Margove. The publishing house is Margove. Margove is a mythical bird from a Russian fairy tale. That's been my nickname for a long time on all social networks, Telegram, and Skype, there too. And in the end, we continued working together. Her name is Natalia Kulagina. So, we became Ilf and Petrov, only a man and a woman, complementing and developing each other's ideas. Of course, she's deeply in love with the North. She was far away. It was from me that she first heard about airships, about flying people. But nevertheless, she got involved not just by rewriting my notes or the texts I dictated, and as a result, since the end of last year, we've been working actively together. I said, come on, please help me out at first. I really wanted a short, concise preface, specifically chapter by chapter, heading by heading, you know. In short, our boy didn't just fly there and come back. He immersed himself in the magical world of Russian fairy tales and myths. He saw it all from a bird's eye view. And in the end, he was 14 years old, a teenager, when he came back, already matured, already self-aware, having discovered his own path forward. In other words, who am I? Why am I here? Kids and teenagers often have a lot of that kind of nihilism. They think they know everything. At the same time, sometimes they don't listen to parents, not because parents saying wrong, but because they. What do my parents know? I'm already an adult. Or, on the contrary, they're completely under their parents' control. But in this case, his grandfather takes him on a journey. Off they go. After that, the book started to grow. An illustrator joined us. So far, he's the only one who has read the entire book, because the illustrations had to be thought up. And now they're all done, 300 illustrations. The illustrations are like sketches, drawings made by Artyom himself. It's as if it's truly the distinctive style of a beginner artist, diligently trying out various sketches in his own personal notebook, carefully capturing his magnificent airships, the esteemed captain, and so on. And in the end, we ultimately got a wonderful book, which is like an exciting movie, but it's not magic, it's still technology. Yet at the same time, it's a bridge to the future. A technological future, including for our country, yes. And our culture, our fascinating fairy tales and ancient myths. Many people simply don't truly know their historical roots in this significant sense, and they know very little indeed about our wonderful country. All the more so because, in our book, this remarkable flight took place over remote places that you really can't just reach right away. Yes, you can only get there by airship. The vast Puturana Plateau, the rugged coast of the Arctic Ocean, distant Kolyma, and expansive Yakutia. So, this journey through these points, there's an interesting spot, a real place on the Arctic Ocean coast, where the Kolyma River flows into the ocean. Today, it exists, and this book features adventure set in this center. It's called Pleistocene Park. I recommend you check it out. That is, there are unique people living right next to us in our country, people who set goals for themselves, like those who started the Aeronova project. This is also a challenge. It's a real challenge. I mean, guys, if we're just talking about money, there are so many ways to make money nowadays, if that's all you care about. But I think that the people who do this, including those behind the Pleistocene Park, which is funded by the Russian billionaire Melnichenko, are working to restore the fauna, the extinct fauna, meaning animals that once lived on the shores of the Arctic Ocean. They even have plans to clone a mammoth.
Wow, seriously? I think I've come across that somewhere.
It's been around since 1997, this park for 28 years. His last name's Zemin. Nikita, he's the most cited Russian scientist in the West, because he deals with very unconventional problems that no one else. And it was a choice, just like my choice to write a book. So basically, it's quite a significant challenge. I think everyone sets some personal goals for themselves, often wondering, can I truly do it? Will it genuinely work out? Doubts existed. Moments I overcame psychologically. Imposter syndrome. Who are you? Where are you going?
Writing books. There was a response in my soul I needed to do it.
And I said, I want this. I like it. That's it. I'm going to write. And then, as if by a gift from the gods, a co-author appeared who knows the ins and outs of literary. I didn't graduate from any literary institute. I told the story, but that's not all. There's dramaturgy, dialogues, structuring things, many nuances. If you try to master those nuances, you'll write the book your life. I was ready for that. I mean, I didn't have any plans to finish this book and submit it or anything like that. But when I heard about Aeronova, about the airships, it all just fit together for me very harmoniously. From that idea, first the preface was born, which eventually grew into 33 authors' sheets. One sheet is 40,000 characters.
I haven't heard of that.
When you write books, they ask, how many authors' sheets? Each sheet is 40,000 characters. I ended up with 33 authors' sheets. 1,320,000 characters. This book, depending on layout and illustration, fit 800 pages. Harry Potter.
That's a hefty volume, yeah.
A modern-day Harry Potter. Without the English stuff, magical moments. With a Russian fairy tale, because what people are doing today at Aeronova is a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale from the perspective of most people who, well, airships.
Yeah, that's true.
But why?
What?
What airships? And then, when they find out they existed 100 years ago, when I looked it up in my favorite city, my mom was born in 1930, and July 1931, Hindenburg visited our city, Leningrad. It landed near the Komenditsky airfield, picked up our polar explorers, and they flew north. And Artem's journey almost repeats that route, except they didn't go as far. They only made it to Novaya Zemlya back then, in 1931. What's going to happen to me for that? That's why I sent out a cruise, the first cruise on a luxurious, beautiful airship, huge, just as big as the Hindenburg, with all the trimmings, but with new technologies, new materials, new levels of safety, just like ours. Yeah. And I set off this magnificent airship. There were even earthquakes in Kamchatka, an eruption, and the airship withstood it all. It's basically unsinkable. Nothing happened to it because it's... This book isn't a disaster story. It's really about the development of the human spirit, about growing up, and about searching. Because, honestly, we don't really know ourselves either. The sooner a child starts asking questions, the more they'll ultimately achieve. And besides, readers will also start asking themselves the same questions that are in the book. Who am I? Where do I come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? And whom do I serve?
And it's not just about airships. It's also about adventure, about searching for oneself and overcoming certain challenges.
He finds artifacts and eventually, in the monastery, he ends up in a monastery called Wudangshan. Which, let me give you a little spoiler. And there, the monks give him a manuscript, The True Story of Ariel, written by Ariel himself. And after that, there will be a second book as soon as this one is published. The story will continue, and moreover, materials for the third book are already being prepared. Because this is, when you're not limited in the way, well, like Jules Verne, oh, let's go look for the captain. Yeah, there was a little mistake in the text, instead of. Basically, they mixed up the continents. And around the whole world on the yacht Duncan. So, it's like, how should I put it, when there are no limits to your desires and your technical capabilities, then creativity becomes endless. And that's why it all started like this.
That's quite an ambitious plan you have.
Yes, and I do, because technology will never stop. It will keep developing. People have gotten used to them, but with airships, we've only just scratched the surface. The iceberg hasn't surfaced yet. So it's just that we know something is going to happen there. I have no doubt that airships in our country will once again traverse not just the halls of the Bolshoi Theater, but the vast expanses of our enormous nation. As I see it, we can't do without them at all. And indeed, that's how this book was born. I wanted people, especially children, to read it. Captain Aurora. I had different ideas for what to call it. He's a key figure, a very important character in the book. Of course, after all, what's a story without a captain? The captain of the ship, naturally. So I decided he would have the exact same name as Mikhail Mihailovich Gromov. Back in the 1930s, he was the #1 pilot in the Soviet Union. He lived a very long life. He was one of those who also flew over the North Pole after Chkalov. But when people talk about flying over the North Pole, most of them only know Chkalov. But Gromov, well, his name just doesn't have the same ring to it, and most people don't know him, especially the younger generation. Yet he was truly an incredible person in terms of the ideas he had and the records he set back then. Later, he commanded an air army during the war and lived for many more years, eventually becoming a writer. He passed away in 1985, but in any case, he was a person truly worthy of being remembered. Still, I don't mention him directly. So, the captain tells a little bit about who he was named after by his parents, and, accordingly. Well, basically.
So, we have Captain Gromov.
Gromov, yes. By the end of the book, his character is revealed in a very interesting way. So, accordingly, the idea is to create an audience that will be waiting for new books. An audience that perhaps will simply talk about airships, not through technical jargon, not through old photos taken back in the 30s. For some reason, whenever you start talking to people, everyone has this image of the burning Hindenburg. That was so long ago. But that's how the system worked.
There's even something called the Hindenburg syndrome, right? People are afraid of this topic. For them, when people talk about airships, images of disaster, failure, inefficiency, something old, forgotten, and useless come to mind. But that's very far from reality.
Yeah. And the main thing is, 20 years before the Hindenburg, there was a flight of a German military airship to Africa. A very interesting flight. I won't have that particular story in my book, but one of the participants from that flight will indeed be there, though not in this very much book, but in the upcoming next one. Because with these amazing airships, you can truly travel not just across our own vast country, since it is so incredibly expansive, but even more so across the entire continent of Africa, which is even considerably bigger. When we look at the map, like the ones hanging in schools, those geographic maps are actually misleading and not drawn correctly. Our country is actually half the size of Africa, but it looks bigger on the map. Africa is truly enormous, that continent. And there's a lot to see there, and there's history too.
And to explore as well.
Yes, to truly explore. The book is essentially about exploring the vast North, about deeply delving into its fascinating artifacts and the beautiful Valam Island. Now, you can actually get there even without airships. It's very, very close to the city of St. Petersburg. But as for the vast Puterona Plateau or the remote Novaya Zemlya,
sorry, there's no way to do it without airships.
You simply can't go there, even for a very short period of time, and it's truly dangerous, because if something unfortunate happens, you absolutely cannot be rescued by helicopter or plane at such vast distances, even if help does eventually arrive. By the way, I know that Sergey Brin, the head of Google, is building a huge airship specifically for rescue missions in various emergency situations. This is truly about creating a future, really, a society where magnificent airships will be just as natural and commonplace as our modern gadgets are today, and so on. And you have to read books, so I hope. Oh, by the way, here's a very interesting point, because nowadays there are a lot of conversations, or let's say, there's this interesting trend, right? Artificial intelligence, AI. But the thing is, if a person, a child, doesn't read books, they won't develop abstract thinking. And they'll just be a tool in someone's hands. And sure, they might have an amazing tool at their disposal, but to use it, you need to have abstract thinking. Abstract thinking is developed only through reading books, There's no other way. And also, let them write too, because honestly, I haven't met, probably. At least my kids, even when they were really little, tried to write little notes. You read them a book, a fairy tale, and then later they come to Dad and jot down a few lines.
We were simply assigned to write an essay on the material we had read.
This is just a simple child's desire to imitate what adults really do with them, right? But there's another point. I should probably mention, in this book there's a part, our travelers don't stop there, they just pass by, but the captain tells everyone on board about it. There's a place like that in our country, up north, also on the eastern Puturana Plateau. It's the Papagaï Crater. I heard about it from my beloved father, may he rest in eternal peace, who was once a distinguished geologist. Back in the early 1950s, he was just starting out as a promising geologist and worked closely with those who originally discovered the precious diamonds in Yakutia. Mere kimberlite pipe. Victor Mercedes. My father reached 90, Mercedes 95. People of that era. But they were the ones who discovered diamond deposits in Yakutia for our country. And up north, just a bit south of the Taimyr Peninsula, there's this crater that's 100 kilometers in diameter. You can't go there. There are no roads at all to get there. But if you go 10 meters deep into this crater, it's all diamonds, billions and billions of carats of industrial impact diamonds. They can't be used for jewelry, but today they can be used in manufacturing, not just in processing industries. Today, as I know, computer technology is developing rapidly, where diamonds are used as substrates, along with graphene and more. So this is absolutely new technology, and our country has the largest supply. So readers, too, should direct their energy toward this. What? Why? This is our common heritage, and there's even more there.
When was this deposit discovered?
This is the Papagaï Crater, where it was found in the late 60s, early 70s. It was known before, but they looked in Yakutia. It was easier there. But over there, more than 50 years have passed, and still.
Well, my point is that to this day, that place hasn't been developed or studied.
Yes, it would require huge investments, a lot of funding, but you also need transportation that would allow you to get there.
That's exactly why it hasn't been developed. It would take money and resources to reach the place and get everything out.
Because we can't even imagine how vast our country really is. I truly hope that everyone who reads this compelling book will travel along with Artyom, worry about his many adventures, his coming-of-age journey, and all the dangerous moments he will inevitably go through. He will find many ancient and mysterious artifacts that destiny itself will sort of guide him to uncover and discover, and then proceed to collect a specific and essential tool, and then, when he holds a tool of immense power in his hands, it's up to the person to choose. What will they do with it? Use it as a weapon or for good? Destroy or make use of it? And so on. So, this is the kind of moment that probably everyone faces when they think about their own life, or about certain inventions, or even myths and legends. They wonder, well, if I got my hands on the elixir of immortality, I would use it. Of course, when someone is 60 or 70 years old, they probably say, yes, of course, I would use it. But a teenager who doesn't really think about questions of life and death
And imagines themselves in that situation.
And the only thing is, even though it's a book for teenagers, it also raises this question from the perspective that we've come here, we've been born. And the question of death, and the question of our responsibility, our life, what we will spend our life on.
What choice will we make?
Yes, because in the end, there is one thing guaranteed for all of us. It's unlikely that any of us will be able to repeat the feat of Lama Itigilov and become incorruptible, and people from all over the world, both Buddhists and others, come to him with prayers and requests. By the way, He doesn't solve any material problems, but there are already a huge number of people who talk about healings and finding a new path for themselves. He truly is a powerful spiritual force who works not only for Belyaev, but for our entire country. Because, really, only in our country do we have such a phenomenon right now, something you can actually touch. Well, maybe not physically touch, but at least mentally, he's right there, close by.
By the way, Vyacheslav, here's an interesting point. As I understand it, your book walks the line between fantasy and reality. And, as far as I truly understand, Archeum travels through various real places that actually exist on our very own planet, in our beloved country, and it's precisely there that he encounters numerous diverse trials, significant challenges, and important choices.
With adventures. For example, there's a very interesting spot on the map of our country, the Southern Urals, Archeum. Many people already know about it. A truly ancient city belonging to our very ancient civilization was excavated there quite recently, in the 1990s. There are different opinions about what it was built for. But the fact remains that this city is older than the Egyptian pyramids. That's in our country. But at the very same time, when Archeum flies together with the impressive Polystation Park, that's also a significant place that truly exists even today. It's not just science fiction. There are indeed real people actually there, actively doing things, diligently working, and conducting important research. But I let myself dream a little that by 2035 there will be lots and lots of interesting animals in that park, including some that supposedly shouldn't live in the north, but why not? We can see how everything is changing now, and nobody knows what the north will become either. The world is changing, our country is changing, and technology at least allows us to peek into the places where so-called reality ends. Because what is reality and what is science fiction? Where is the line?
And that line keeps shifting. That's what's fantastic. A few decades ago, this would have been more than just science fiction.
But for us, it's become something completely ordinary. We've gotten so used to it that we can't imagine our lives without it. But really, if you stop and think about it, my father and his colleagues, when they traveled through Yakutia, along the Belyaev River, along the Lena, searching for diamonds, they didn't have these things. But that didn't stop them from setting such ambitious goals for themselves. Yes, the country sent them there. Yes, they didn't just go searching for diamonds on their own, but still, geologists were romantics in their own way. Not everyone would choose a profession like that, to become a geologist. For example, walking thousands of kilometers on foot, carrying those backpacks, hauling rocks, taking samples, and so on. But people who wanted their country to develop chose this profession and explored the land. Even now, in this modern era, we still have so many vast, unexplored areas, truly just blank spots on the global map, where no human being has ever set foot, not even a single citizen of the mighty Russian Federation. And there are so many like that. Well, if the population density in Yakutia is 1 person per square kilometer, that's the average density, and if you consider that 99% of the people in Yakutia live in Yakutsk, then the rest is basically empty, just vast empty spaces. And the Table Mountains, both in Yakutia and, for example, the Puturana Plateau, what are they? Modern geologists say, of course, it's the result of millions of years, natural weathering of the rock. It just erodes away. Right? Although, there is a question. Yeah, because there are pyramids standing right nearby, also in Chukaka. Apparently, those also formed naturally. That's just how they were shaped, into geometric forms, in the Urals, the Far East, Kamchatka, Chukaka. It's just that these lands I've just listed, they're really outside of our attention. But Moscow, St. Petersburg, Krasnodar Krai, Sochi, well, the Urals, and most people, well, before everyone used to travel abroad, but now, thank God, they're traveling around the country. But still, Well, I know people are starting to explore Altai now, but all those vast areas, are there even people living there? Even if there aren't, there are polar bears living there.
The most beautiful, picturesque places.
Whales in the Sea of Okhotsk. And so on. All of this is in this book. I think you'll see our beloved country with new eyes. And you'll also have something to talk about with your children and grandchildren. Because this isn't just some fantasy like Tolkien, where it's all unclear. It's 100% made up. Yes, the characters are fictional, sure, well, but that's my right as the author, right? But all the places and the transport itself are not made up. So it's a kind of blend of science fiction. Well, kind of like what Jules Verne did, I suppose. Of course, I'm not trying to claim Jules Verne's laurels, although I think that Jules Verne, among other things, a lot of what we consider to be a science fiction, he was actually just describing things that he inherited from a previous civilization. Developments, new and exciting technologies that didn't quite make it to the masses back then. Like magnificent airships, for example, people were riding around in simple carts, and then suddenly they were soaring and flying. Just like that, right? Of course not. That's why, even today, with many technologies, people have ideas, someone gives a hint, and that opens up new possibilities. Because really, not everything is so straightforward and simple in this world, in our lives, and there truly is genuine room for miracles and for our creativity, including technical creativity, but also for the flights of imagination. The flights of imagination of any person. That's what makes books truly interesting. Why do we love to read them? What happens to us when we read a book? We deeply dive into that particular space, fully immerse ourselves within it, and then we also thoughtfully add our very own thoughts, our own vivid imagination, like, what if this or that truly happened? Because many authors, even modern ones, both science fiction writers and those who aren't quite sci-fi, when they write good, successful books, they get tons of letters from readers asking if there will be a sequel, or saying, what if this happened, or that? I hope there will be this kind of collaborative creativity together with the readers. Because one way or another, we don't actually invent anything, everything has already been created there. It's just that some people hear it and have the courage to bring it to life, at least on paper, and share it with someone else, like, hey, this is cool, take a look, read it. Maybe you'll like it too, and you liked it because it's science fiction. Here they're building airships, over there's something else, and somewhere else they're making new computers, qubit, quantum ones. Someone might say, what do you mean, quantum computers? They already exist today.
Little by little, they're also making their way into our lives.
And what will happen next? All we can do is imagine. Yes, and that's why I'm inviting you. Your creativity isn't just for you personally. It's also for the dedicated people building our airships. Aeronova also needs that creative energy. People who want more than just to make money. We'll always make money, after all, money comes and goes. But to miss your chance to create something great together as a team.
To walk this path together.
Yes, and to create, specifically, well, through the image of the future, to actually create that future. Yes, you know, the Russian word for future is interesting, right? But if you say it a little differently, I will be again, I will be again. The past is I have passed. The future is I will be again, right? It sounds interesting, but what about the present? Yes, we live only in the present, but it is our attention, spent today in this present world on something that shapes the future we want. Or even, everyone wants to be rich and healthy.
What exactly are they doing about this at this very moment?
That's why you should at least read a book that might touch your soul. And maybe it's true. Well, airships are real. The fairy tales of our country's peoples are real too. That's why we even look at fairy tales a bit primitively. It's just a kind of entertainment, something to distract our kids with, like reading them a bedtime story. But if you were to talk to a child about what they truly saw at that very moment while listening to you tell that fairy tale, I think they'll tell you a lot, especially when they wake up. Airships, after all, are ushering in a new era of new energies. In terms of use, they're more environmentally friendly, well, more eco-friendly. Hydrogen. I also let myself dream a little here, since our current Aeronova airships are planned to use helium. Of course, yes. Of course, yes. Well, I dreamed a bit and wrote there, at the end of the book, that our Soviet scientists, well, Russian scientists, I mean the Soviet school, after all, came up with a way to use hydrogen absolutely safely.
And maybe to some, this might seem like science fiction, but
the Hindenburg flew on hydrogen. And today, Toyota is building hydrogen engines and fueling cars with hydrogen, and so on. So, in reality, all of this is right here next to us, but often we think these are just dreamers, people who have nothing better to do. Maybe they should just go watch soccer instead.
I'm more than sure that in the near future, we'll be able to harness hydrogen as well. And it's quite likely that it will also be used safely, and airships will become even more eco-friendly, more economical, and more efficient.
Well, at the very least, is it possible to set such a goal? Yes, it's possible. The question is how to solve it. Well, many unsolvable issues in engineering and technology have been solved before, haven't they? There are architectural monuments that no one today can truly replicate. But someone indeed built them once.
Yes. And we're talking hundreds or even tens of thousands of years ago.
Well, maybe tens of thousands, maybe just hundreds of years ago. But in any case, it doesn't matter when it was. We'll never find the real truth with absolute precision, right? But the fact remains, there it is, this object standing in my favorite city, an unbelievable structure, St. Isaac's Cathedral. It shouldn't even exist, because it has a steel dome. Back in technical school, and later at the Institute, I studied first as a shipbuilder, then at the Energy Engineering faculty of the Polytechnic Institute. And in my materials science classes, I clearly remember, even after all these years, how steel and the production of steel only appeared at the very end of the 19th century. Steel is. Sure, you can make something out of stone, but how do you make steel? But that's an entire science. It's an art, a technology, a high technology, because steel structures, well, back then there was no one. I mean, as we're taught, for us, it's impossible. But there it stands. So tell me, name the craftsman, the artisan, who, at which factories, managed to build such a structure, I don't know, without structural analysis, without pre-stressed constructions back then, and yet it was built. It stands for centuries and still pleases the eye. And the question arises, what a masterpiece! And today, ask any builder or architect to repeat it. Even with today's technological advancements, they wouldn't be able to replicate it. In short, let's dream and take action together. And don't worry. Simply put, you, those who are here, who listen to these podcasts, who have chosen their path together with Aeronova, you've done everything right. And as for any doubts, just burst them aside. Because anything can happen in life, but the probability of two events is always the same, so it's either to be or not to be.
Thank you for your trust, for those kind words. Before we finish, I'd like to read a small excerpt directly from the book, if I may.
Well, I should say, this is just a book presentation. Yes, yes, yes. The book is at the end further on. For now, read here, okay?
Annotation.
Yes, it's an annotation.
On board the airship, Artyom and his grandfather, the eccentric Scotsman Simon, met some strange artists and others. But it turns out that all these people ended up on the airship for a reason. They're searching for ancient artifacts. Only Artyom isn't looking for anything, because he doesn't believe in fairy tales, but it's him whom the ancient gods have chosen to be the guide to the magical world of the Russian North. No one knows exactly what the artifacts look like or where to find them, but everyone understands the consequences if the ancient energy rises again from the darkness of ages past. But how do you find your role in the game and believe in ancient powers when you're just a teenager? Artyom is only 14 years old. He's traveling on an airship for the first time, and he has no idea about ancient wars or his own destiny. He finds a remarkable book written especially for him and faces a profound choice: set it aside or read it completely to the very end. A truly unique journey by airship over the mysterious Russian North and the vast Arctic region sheds light not only on ancient secrets, but also allows you to see these protected places from a truly unusual and captivating perspective. From the height of the airship, the mystical North becomes even more unfathomable and beautiful.
This is precisely what readers will ultimately see on the very final page of the book. This text.
So, let me read it too.
This is when people pick up the book.
The back of the book.
On the back cover.
Are you ready to board the Aurora? Open the book and choose your own fate. Believe in the unbelievable. Decipher the signs of the gods. Find the artifact before it's too late. Fulfill your destiny before ancient forces change the world forever. Explore the vast Russian North and the Arctic. Discover the truly last known ancient civilization, Hyperborea. Uncover the magnificent ancient secrets of the North from aboard an airship. Awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Some small illustrations.
This is an illustration. Naturally, when I was describing the impressive airship, I was truly inspired, among many other things, by precisely how the Hindenburg was constructed and built.
I recognized it right away, by the way, from the illustrations.
Well, for now, since we're still tied to reality, you can't just come up with a truly completely fantastical or an entirely unrealistic picture.
In 1935, it's unlikely that much would change. I mean, maybe there would be flying saucers or something, but that's about it. Although the appearance of the airship probably wouldn't change, the interior design would be completely different.
This is a truly luxurious cruise airship, an exclusive airship for wealthy and affluent people, because I genuinely think the very first discerning travelers on airships will be those who possess the significant financial means and the strong desire. And the opportunity, because even today, for example, I know that Americans have also announced the creation of such a cruise airship for 2027. They plan the first flights, and the cruise there costs $250,000. But I think in Russia the price will be more affordable, but still, we also have many wealthy people who will want to be among the first to fly.
So, friends, as you can see, airships are not just about business, not just about money. They're about dreams, about romance, about travel, about the fire in our hearts and the desire to explore ourselves in this world. Well, that's probably it. Let's wrap things up. Vyacheslav, thank you so much for this fascinating conversation. What are your thoughts on all this? Leave some comments. Let us know what you think about the book itself. And definitely a few words of thanks, some inspiring words for Vyacheslav for taking on such a noble, truly worthwhile endeavor, if I may say so. Promoting this field, this sense of romance, the love of adventure, of airships, I think it's wonderful, it's awesome, and it's something worth pursuing. Let us know what you expect from this kind of collaboration in the future. We'll be waiting. That's all. Thanks again to everyone who's watching and staying engaged. See you next time.
I hope we weren't too long-winded and that you'll be able to watch this material. I hope you have the patience for it.
That's it. Thanks everyone. Goodbye. See you soon.